Hi guys, I am here to do a read aloud for our reading story for Klondike Kate. That is hard to say. And it's a biography, and a biography is a written account of a person's life told by somebody else. So it's not an autobiography, it's just a biography, which means it's a story of somebody's life. And as I'm reading, I want you to look for information about their life, okay, about Klondike Kate's life and events that are presented in time order. And let's get started. So open your reading book to page 697, and we are reading Klondike Kate. And just so you know, I may have to take a drink of water because the story is long. So if I take a drink of water, I apologize. But if I want to get through the whole thing, I may need a little bit of water. So, just disclaimer, I'm sorry. All right. Gold. They found gold. The paperboy waved a copy of the Vancouver Sun. Gold in the Yukon. It was a hot morning in July 1898. Kate Ryan, a 28-year-old nurse, was on her way to the hospital in Vancouver, Canada. She hurried to join the crowd around the newsboy. According to the story, a Tagish Indian named Shuckum Jim was guzzling water from his hat when he looked down and discovered chunks of gold as big as beans floating inside. Skockum Jim and his partners quickly grabbed a frying pan and began finding nuggets everywhere. This news was almost a year old when it reached Kate Ryan. Rabbit Creek, where the gold was discovered, was a tributary of the Klondike River. It flowed through a remote region of northern Canada, far from telegraph lines. Once ice locked up the rivers, boat travel stopped, and letters took months to reach the outside world. Now the world of the discovery was finally out. It spread up and down the coast like a raging brush fire. In Seattle, Washington, 5,000 people who had heard the news waited for the steamer, Portland, to pull into the harbor. A rough band of miners straggled down the gangway, their suitcases, boxes, and trunks laden with gold weighing more than a ton. One passenger, Eltha Berry, had left California with $60 in her pocket. Now she stood on the deck in a torn dress, waiting for help with her bedroll, which was too heavy to lift alone. It held $100,000 in gold. Newspaper reporters rushed to interview Berry. What would she tell other women who wanted to go north? Why, to stay away, of course, she said. If Kate Ryan knew about Eltha Berry's advice, she ignored it. Kate had grown up in the wilderness of Jonesville, New Brunswick, and she didn't like the city life. Besides, times were hard all over the country, and she was restless in her job. Always eager for adventure, Kate said later she was lured by the call of the wild and nothing else, and so, she said, I joined the procession. Her friends were appalled. Had she lost her mind? Women shouldn't travel alone to that part of the world, and how would she get there? Boats could only navigate the Yukon River in summer, and there were no roads or trains. Other warnings appeared in the papers. A woman reporter for the Skagway News warned that delicate women have no right attempting the trip. Those who love luxury, comfort, and ease would better remain at home. It takes strong, healthy, courageous women to stand the terrible hardships. Okay, so we have a woman here who is going to go in search of gold. And when we think of the gold rush and people who were part of it, we mostly think of men, right? We think of the pictures of men, and they are the ones who find the gold. However, there are stories of women who have found gold, and we're reading one right now because it's a biography. So far we know that she's a nurse, we know that she is in Canada, and she's going to leave Canada to go to the Yukon in search of gold. So, page 701. At 6 feet tall, Kate Ryan was strong and healthy. As a teenager, she had developed perfect posture by walking on the roof beams of her family's barn, and she had never known much comfort. Her parents, Patrick and Ellen Ryan, had migrated to Canada to escape Ireland's potato famine, had cleared land in the thick forests of New Brunswick. They struggled to feed their family of 7 children on the small earnings from their farm and a shop attached to their house. Kate, the youngest, had worked hard since she was little, picking potatoes until her hands were raw, chopping wood, helping her father mind the store and the animals. Now a fortune beckoned from rivers whose veins of gold, some said, lay as thick as cheese in a sandwich. Kate just needed to figure out which route to take. There were 2 ways to reach the remote Klondike. The coastal route, which took passengers up the Yukon River, was only passable in the summer and was very expensive. Kate chose the cheaper but more dangerous all-Canada route, crossing the Alaskan Panhandle into Canada. Most of the trip was over land, which was fine with Kate. Boats made her seasick. After a few months, Kate had saved enough money to buy her ticket and supplies. The Canadian government had passed a law requiring Klondike adventurers to bring enough food, tools, and warm clothes to last a year. The Skagway News published a recommended clothing list for women, which advised them to bring practical items, such as tall bicycle shoes, lace-up boots, and a mattress ticking which could be filled with dried moss. Kate brought her list to the Hudson Bay Company, where a clerk helped her pick out warm clothes as well as a heavy, waterproof mackinaw, a heavy cloth of wool and other fibers, a sleeping bag, and an axe. The clerk presented her with a gift, a small black leather bag with a secret pocket. Any lady with the courage to head up to the Yukon on her own deserves the support of the Hudson Bay Company, he told her. Kate's food supplies were enormous. She bought 50 pounds of flour, 150 pounds each of bacon and split peas, as well as canned milk and fruit. Finally, she purchased her ticket for the steamer Tees, scheduled to leave in February. The boat would only take her as far as Wrangell Island, Alaska. How would she get from there to the northern goldfields? She first thought of pack horses. Kate had ridden horses since she was young, and her father had taught her how to pick out a good animal, but she couldn't find horses sturdy enough to carry heavy loads through the deep snow. So Kate spent $100 on a team of huskies and a sled, even though she knew nothing about driving a dog team. What do we see of Kate so far? Is there any hesitation in what she's doing? Absolutely not. She is courageous. She's going for this. She's planning it out. She's trying new things. She's courageous. She's brave. And she has people around her who think that she's crazy, but she's not. She's adventurous. She's brave. She's courageous. She's doing something that they only wish they could do. Page 704. At last, on February 28, 1898, Kate climbed on board the Tees. In addition to her dogs, sled, and other equipment, she carried her Bible, a rosary, and a $5 gold piece from her friends in Vancouver. They wanted her to invest it for them in the Klondike. When Kate waved goodbye to her friends at the deck, she didn't know if she'd ever see them again. Kate was setting off for one of the most remote stretches of wilderness left on the continent. Rough seas battered the Tees as she headed north with a cargo of men, a few women, and many animals. The horses, sled, dogs, cows, chickens, and even a few goats made for a noisy, smelly ride. The steamer passed boats full of disappointed gold seekers headed south, warning of the dangers ahead, but Kate was too seasick to notice. Okay, this is maybe the one weakness that we see in Kate, is that she gets seasick. Other than that, we haven't really seen any weakness. After 4 days at sea, the ship dumped its passengers and their cargo on the muddy beach at Wrangell Island. Kate gathered her supplies, untangled her dogs, and hurried to find a ride to the mainland. She needed to mush her team up the frozen Stikine River before the spring thaw melted the ice. While on the island, Kate visited a troop of Northwest Mounted Police who were waiting for a ferry. A friendly Mountie named George Chalmers offered her a cup of bitter coffee and told her his sad story. The camp's cook had left, and Chalmers had been ordered to take his place. The Mounties were complaining about his terrible meals. Could Kate advise him on cooking dinner? Fortunately, Kate had grown up in a big family and knew how to cook for a crowd. They set up the stove, then fried pork and baked biscuits. The Mounties wolfed down the food. When their chief officer, Inspector Primrose, praised her cooking, Kate made him an offer. She could cook for his unit until they reached the Canadian border if he would put her name on his list of ferry passengers. Primrose agreed immediately. The next morning, Kate visited Ringel's bakery. He gave Kate a fistful of sourdough starter and taught her how to turn the mix of flour and water into bread, biscuits, and pancakes. Kate didn't realize how much this gift would help her as she began her adventures in the north. And this is where I take a drink of water so that I can keep going for you guys. Okay. Just a quick little drink of water, and then we're on page 705. When Kate and the Mounties finally crossed to the mainland, Kate loaded her sled, hitched up her huskies, and buttoned her mackinaw. Kate and her dogs floundered through deep snow and slush as they followed the Mounties up the Stikine River to the town of Judini, where it began to rain. Water poured through Kate's tent, soaking her clothes and supplies. The Mounties set up a permanent camp to patrol the border and urged Kate to stay. She had become their friend as well as their cook, but Kate had to push on before the ice melted. Besides, she told a reporter years later, I wasn't built for going backwards. When I once step forward, I must go ahead. Kate continued north alone. The Stikine River cut through deep canyons with rocky walls rising steeply on each side. It was almost unheard of for a woman to travel this route, known as the most treacherous path to the Klondike. Yet it could be done. One brave African American woman named Lucille Hunter had made the journey with her husband the year before while she was 9 months pregnant. That's commitment. Trudging behind her dogs, Kate traveled 8 to 10 grueling miles a day when she finally pulled into the tiny settlement of Glenora. 80 miles up the river, the news spread fast. A white woman was in town. Not only that, she was as tall and strong as the men who were packing supplies into the north. She wore a broad-brimmed cow driver's hat over her auburn curls. Jim Calbreth, a local resident who became Kate's friend, said, any woman who could make it up the Stikine River on the ice should be treated as an equal to any packer in the territory. Kate told Calbreth that thousands of people with gold fever would be arriving by boat as soon as the ice broke up. When Calbreth decided to build a hotel, Kate took the $5 gold piece from her secret pocket and offered Calbreth a deal. If she invested in his project, could she open a restaurant in his building? He agreed, and soon an old packing shed and warehouse were converted into the Glenora Hotel and Restaurant. Kate's restaurant became a popular meeting spot for customers who enjoyed her stews and her sourdough bread and biscuits, which rose thanks to her original fistful of starter. At the end of April, the river ice began to groan and crack like pistol shots. Sorry, Miss Crayons cannot read. I'm trying, guys. I'm sorry. Huge chunks of ice swept down the river. Before long, boats full of prospectors pulled into town. Passengers who expected a railroad were shocked to find a sleepy village of less than 100 people with no transportation further north. Houses and tents sprang up overnight. Calbreth went away for 2 weeks, and when he returned, he found someone had added onto his store without his permission. An army unit was camped in his potato field, and Kate had so many customers she didn't have time to talk. The town also had a brand new newspaper which boasted that Glenora was the town that was built in a day. Kate spent most of the next year in Glenora, living in her tent. As winter cut off supplies of fresh food, she hired young boys to catch fish and learned to cook with dry eggs, potatoes, and onions. The restaurant was wildly successful. When spring came, Kate could call herself a true sourdough, the label given to an outsider who had survived a northern winter. She had also saved up plenty of gold without ever going into the diggings. But Kate was restless. When she heard rumors about even bigger strikes in the Klondike, she sold her restaurant and headed north again. Kate rode out of town alone, leading a string of pack horses. She wore a short split skirt which allowed her to ride astride. Traveling through swamps thick with mosquitoes and heavy forests where she could hardly find the trail, Kate finally reached Teslin Lake. There she planned to catch a boat to Dawson, but a thin skim of ice already covered the lake. There were no boats in sight, and it was too late to go back. Kate didn't have enough supplies to start another restaurant. Fortunately, Kate's friend Inspector Primrose heard she was in the area. The Mounties at his new camp needed a nurse. Primrose remembered that Kate had once worked in a hospital and sent her a message asking her to come for the winter. Although she never had any formal training as a nurse, Kate had cared for a woman in Seattle who was dying of tuberculosis before she worked at the Vancouver hospital. She accepted the inspector's offer right away, covering the 60 miles in 5 days. She had to cross a mountain pass in temperatures that started at minus 40 degrees and fell to minus 60 degrees. Page 710. Kate arrived safely and was soon living in her tent again. All winter she took care of sick Mounties and did their washing, one of the worst jobs in the north. She melted snow for wash water, scrubbed the dirty clothes on a washboard, then wrung them out by hand and dried them near the stove. The Mounties were so happy to have clean shirts that they paid high prices for her labor. The winter was incredibly difficult. The isolated settlement ran low on food. With no fresh fruit or vegetables, many people suffered from scurvy. Others developed frostbite. At Christmas, Kate added her tiny supply of 6 potatoes sent by her family in New Brunswick to make the meager dinner more festive. On the coldest nights, her loyal Mountie friends took turns loading her stove to make sure her fire never went out. Kate was relieved when spring came and she could walk along the rough trail to the town of Whitehorse. As soon as she arrived, she set up her tent, poked her stovepipe through the roof, and was in business again. This time, at a friend's suggestion, she posted a sign outside the road, Klondike Kate's Cafe. The name stuck, and she was soon known to all as Klondike Kate. Kate took a free miner's license, which allowed her to pan for gold herself. She also loaned miners money to help them get started with their claims. In northern Canada and Alaska, the ground stays frozen all year, so prospectors needed extra cash to support themselves through the winter months. When they built fires to melt the permafrost, then dug out the pay dirt. In the spring, they washed out the gold, and Kate got her money back, along with a share of their earnings. She also invested in copper mines, continued to take in washing, and sometimes helped people who were sick, although she never charged for her nursing services. After 6 months, Kate had earned enough money to build her own cabin. For the first time since she left Vancouver, she had walls, a floor, and curtains over the windows. At the same time, she moved her restaurant into a hotel. No more cooking or sleeping in a tent. As the town grew, so did the crime rate. Usually men got in trouble. Sorry, goodness gracious. But occasionally, the Northwest Mounted Police took a woman into custody. And they wished they had a policewoman on the force to deal with female prisoners. When the Canadian Parliament passed a law allowing the Mounties to hire women, the Yukon Detachment asked Kate Ryan to be their first woman special. Kate knew nothing about being a police officer, but then she mushed a team of dogs up a river, opened restaurants, panned for gold, and performed minor surgery, all without much training. She became a woman special in February 1900, exactly 2 years after she left Vancouver. Kate stayed on in Whitehorse for many years. Like many women who left a more civilized life to follow the call of the wild, Kate never stopped being. Yet she was celebrated all over the North for her courage and her great heart. Her great niece described Kate as very straight-laced, yet generous to the rough miners who lived around her. According to one prospector, Kate was known everywhere as the miner's friend. Whenever she heard that some poor man was lying sick and alone on the trail, she'd get to him. I've known her in the wintertime to mush it in with a dog team for 100 miles and bring a sick fellow out. In spite of the hardships she faced, Kate always preferred life in the wilderness. She had never been happy in cities or towns. I love the North, she said. It's a glorious country and has a wonderful future. Like other unsung Western heroines, Kate Ryan left her own permanent mark on the frontier. And that is the end of the story. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry for the little stumbles, but I never claimed to be perfect, and you get the idea of the story. Think about this. She was a nurse. She was part of the mounted police as a woman. She cooked. She cleaned. She panned for gold. She did all of these amazing things in a time where women didn't do these things. You know, they were at home or, you know, that kind of stuff. But she was different, and she showed us that you can do anything that you put your mind to. I hope you enjoy this story, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the stories for this group of lessons, 26 through 30, because they're interesting. And this is all I have. Hopefully you watched the second part of my language arts lesson, which is the actual lesson part, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.